Alright guys, Dominic here for Kit Guru, and today we're looking at the new Razer Abyssus Essential mouse. At £50 it's actually Razer's new entry-level mouse, and although it's not cheap, it's designed to offer a kind of cut-down, no-frills experience when compared to the pricier DeathAdder Elite, Razer Basilisk and the Razer Mamba, for instance. So diving straight into the design, I'm actually going to start with my two main criticisms. First of all, as you have probably noticed by now, there are no side buttons and there's no DPI button or buttons. So really, right from the off, what you're getting is quite a limited mouse in terms of feature set. We recently actually ran a poll on Twitter and we found a significant majority of you actually do like to use your side buttons. So for a £50 mouse, given the fact that the Abyssus Essential does not have any side buttons or a DPI button, it's just really a bit inconvenient and it's perhaps not the best start for the mouse. So what do you do if you do want to change the DPI stage, for instance? Well, one option is to just do it in the software, and that's something we'll look at in a minute, but you can also use Razer's Hypershift technology. Essentially what that does is it lets you map a modifier key, and then you can use that modifier to program a secondary layer of functions to the mouse. However, because the Abyssus Essential has so few buttons to begin with, the only way you can actually use Hypershift with the Abyssus Essential is if you have a Razer keyboard that is already compatible with Synapse 3.0. So really, the lack of a DPI button does hurt the mouse. So that's the first criticism out the way, and the second thing is actually to do with the main body of the mouse. It's all quite smooth plastic and there are no rubber side grips, as you can see. So essentially what that means is it's quite smooth anyway, and once you've been gaming for a little bit and your hands are maybe getting a little bit sweaty, it does become quite slippery. I don't mind the fact that it's all plastic. I know some people really don't like to use rubber side grips, but I do think the plastic has got to be textured if you're going to go for the all plastic approach, because at the moment it's just quite smooth and it can get a bit slippery. So with those two criticisms out the way, let's look at the shape. It's obviously an ambidextrous design and it's also quite low profile. I've compared it here to the DeathAdder Elite and you can see it's significantly shorter and it doesn't have a nearly as pronounced a hump towards the back of the mouse. Personally, the shape isn't really for me. The mouse doesn't kind of fill into your palm enough and it really does necessitate either a claw or fingertip grip unless you have really small hands and you can palm grip the Abyssus Essential. However, the shape is obviously subjective. Some people might really like it for claw or fingertip grip. I didn't find it that comfortable, but as with all mice, it is very subjective, so I'm not going to be too critical in that regard. Now, in terms of build quality, the mouse actually weighs only 78 grams without the cable, which is pretty light, but it still feels quite solid. There is just a little bit of rattle, but honestly I didn't encounter any issues while gaming with it. You couldn't really hear the rattle while gaming, it's only if you shake it really fast like that. So build quality, nothing to complain about. At the top of the mouse you can see the primary buttons do have some slight comfort grooves. They're only subtle but they do feel pretty good and it definitely adds to the experience. The buttons themselves are also quite snappy, they feel really nice. They've got a really solid, quite tight click to them and they both feel quite uniform as well, which is great. The scroll wheel, as you can tell, is also quite low profile. However, scrolling again feels really nice and the click is also quite satisfying there. So despite having no side buttons or DPI button, the buttons that are there are actually pretty good. Now, this cable here is surprisingly long at 2.1 meters. It is only rubber, so it's not braided, and it's not quite of the same quality as the likes of the DeathAdder Elite or Razer Basilisk cables. Personally, I think those are probably the best mouse cables on the market. But for a rubber cable, it's pretty flexible. Once I worked out all the kinks, it was just fine, so I had no issues with that. Perhaps one of the biggest features of the mouse is actually the RGB lighting. We've got the Razer logo down here, which acts as one RGB zone. However, on the bottom, we've also got an RGB strip running around the underside of the mouse, which gives you some lovely underglow. You can choose between a few different effects in the software, and I actually use my mouse with the Goliathus Chroma, which, when you synchronize the lighting, actually looks really good, and the overall effect is definitely impressive. While we're there, looking at the underside of the mouse, the sensor is smack bang in the middle and we've also got two mouse feet, one at the top and one at the bottom. Razer hasn't actually disclosed to us what particular model the sensor is. They've only said it's a true 7200 optical sensor, which doesn't necessarily mean that much. However, we can say it's unlikely to be their top of the line PMW 3389, which we've seen in the likes of the Basilisk and the DeathAdder Elite. However, moving on to performance, the sensor actually didn't cause me any issues whatsoever. Even though it's unlikely to be the top of the line sensor, I experienced no issues with angle snapping, there was no unwanted acceleration or anything like that. In terms of lift-off distance as well, I found the mouse stopped tracking after I'd wedged 2 DVDs under it, which is pretty standard for a gaming mouse of this class. So on the whole, performance is actually really good, nothing to complain about. Even if it's unlikely to be the top of the line sensor, I really had no issues while gaming, so the sensor is definitely not a negative point for the Abyssus Essential. So now taking a look at the software, the Abyssus Essential uses Synapse 3.0 Beta, and the first thing you'll notice when you open it is you've got 4 different tabs: Customize, Performance, Lighting and Calibration. Starting with Customize, this obviously lets you remap the different buttons. However, considering the Abyssus Essential only has the primary left and right clicks as well as a scroll wheel, there's probably not too much you're going to be adjusting there. Over on Performance, you can set up to 5 different DPI stages, and these are adjustable in steps of 100, and you can also change the polling rate from 125, 500 or 1000, and I obviously left mine at 1000 as is standard. In terms of lighting, you have a few quick effects you can choose from here. You've got breathing, reactive, spectrum cycling and static, and if you click this little button here, that will apply it to any other Chroma enabled devices you may have connected. You can also set the brightness between dim, normal and bright, and you can also configure if you want to switch off the lighting, maybe when the display is turned off for instance. If you want to get really into it, you can choose from some advanced effects, and that lets you just configure your own thing using Chroma Studio. The last tab is the calibration, and if you've got another Razer mouse mat already, you can perhaps choose from that, and that will just calibrate the sensor to the mouse pad. However, the Goliathus Chroma isn't yet on the list, so I left mine uncalibrated. Overall, the software is fine. There's not too much to control. It's mostly just the DPI stages and the lighting, but it gets the job done, and it's a new clean interface from Synapse, so really nothing to complain about there. So, wrapping up this review, the Abyssus Essential is a bit of a funny one. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. I personally didn't like the shape and I thought it was a bit slippery. However, the main buttons are really snappy and responsive, the sensor proved to be just fine, and the RGB lighting is actually really good. The main issue for the mouse is the fact that at £50, not having side buttons, not having any DPI buttons, it's simply not an entry-level mouse. For this price, you can get the likes of the Cougar Avenger S, you can get the Cooler Master Master Mouse MM530, and you can even get the Logitech G403 and still have change left over instead of buying the Abyssus Essential. All of those mice have, yep, you guessed it, side buttons, a DPI button, and a top-of-the-line sensor based on the PMW 3360. The problem for the Abyssus Essential then really is just the pricing. At £50, it's just way too expensive what you get. The only people who are really going to be interested in buying this are people who already have Razer products, that only consider buying Razer products, and they really want the chroma lighting to be synchronized across their peripherals. For anyone else who's got £50 to spend on a new mouse, I would recommend you look at maybe one of the ones I mentioned before, because for £50 there definitely are better products out there that have a better all-round feature set and performance. So, I'm Don McFitkit Guru. This has been our review of the new Razer Abyssus Essential. If you like this video, you can give us a thumbs up. You can also leave a comment down below. Hit the subscribe button, and if you want to stay notified about all our future videos, hit the little bell next to that as well. We'd also love to connect with you over on Facebook and Twitter, but until then, I will see you in the next video.